Gaming, especially PC gaming, has become an expensive hobby, but it doesn't necessarily have to be. Now, whether you are someone that plays on consoles or PC or handheld, the second-hand market is something that I love to look at. And the reason for this is, of course, value. Price to performance, you're just getting more out of it than you are new parts. And with the holidays coming up, I feel that a lot of people will be taking a look at well, new to them gaming systems. So these are just systems that are, so to say, pre-loved, but still have a lot to offer in terms of value and in terms of gaming performance, even going into 2025. Now, I like to take a look at these budget systems and just see what is available, what are the current prices, is there anything worth really looking at and anything worth really considering. And a good place to do that, especially for PC parts, is Java.gg. And so today I thought I would have a look at the value PC section of Java.gg with the mindset of shopping around the $500 price. Now, perhaps you want to buy a PC for your child or for a family member, or you're someone that wants to try and get into gaming and buy a PC for yourself. These PCs here are a good value for any of those things really, and overall you'll find plenty of options here for many happy gaming memories to be made. So let's take a look at what is on offer and exactly what kinds of PCs you can get around the $500 to, let's say, $700 price point. First up here, we have a really good looking PC, and I think you'll see that is a theme on Java because these PCs are made to sell. So they all are presentable, they're clean, they look nice, they have little extras added just for having them be attractive and for looking nice for a prospective customer. This one here is a GTX 1660 Ti with a Ryzen 1700, and it is stated as being a 1080p gaming computer. Now that is what it is. Let's see how much RAM it has. So it has 16 gigs of DDR4 RAM, of course, being a first generation Zen CPU, the Ryzen 1700, and I had the CPU a couple of years ago. I really enjoyed it. It was a good CPU. This comes with a 1TB NVMe SSD, a Gen 3 one. It's a little bit older, but still good. Now, of course, the 1700 is an 8-core 16-thread CPU, and so even for today's gaming, the cores are a little bit slower than what we have now, but it's still a very good CPU. The MSI Ventus GTX 1660 Ti 6GB is a surprisingly capable card going into 2025, and 3200 megahertz RAM is still up there with the average of RAM right now. The MSI B350 Tomahawk motherboard, I had this exact motherboard as well, really good motherboard. This comes with a PVR 650 watt gold rated power supply, a PVR case, a PVR RGB fans, and a air killer CPU cooler. And this comes with Windows 11 installed and activated. Let's take a look at the computer itself. Very presentable, looks really nice. And I remember thinking this motherboard, when I had it, it's just such a pleasant motherboard to look at. It's such a military theme, which I really liked about the Tomahawk motherboards. I don't think it was stated, but it seems like you even get some custom cables with, so that's also very nice. And this PC has a nice red theme. I'm not sure why the RGB on the RAM. No, this RAM doesn't have RGB. It just sort of looked like that, but I think it's just a semi-reflective metal. But all in all, a really good looking computer. In terms of value, this is being sold for $560. Now, I'm not considering shipping in this. I'm just taking a look at the price because people are based in different areas, and I think you have to be in America to buy from Java in the first place. So let's forget about shipping and just take a look at the value itself. For $560, it's not a bad value. I mean, you can build this for cheaper. You can build it for about $400, but it's not going to look as good as this. You know, it's going to be a struggle to find parts. This case looks new, and I feel like if you're someone that isn't necessarily into PC building, but just wants to pick up a system and play, this seems fantastic value. And of course, this is not as good as a PlayStation 5, but this is much better than a PlayStation 4 if you're going to compare it to consoles. Something a little bit better, something more along the lines of a PlayStation 5, is the Hit 1080p Beast. Now this has a 2060 Super. It has an i5 8600K, which is not much better than a 1700 from AMD. It has 16 gigs of Fury RAM and also a 1 terabyte PCIe NVMe drive. So what makes this one relatively better is of course that 2060. Now the 2060 isn't that much better than the 1660, but it does offer some basic ray tracing. And taking a look at this, it seems to be vertically mounted, but it's a really weird looking card. I'm exactly sure what brand that is, but it's quite an odd looking one. All in all, the PC looks quite nice. This seems to have been taken from an old Lenovo or something like that. So it's an interesting computer, because you'll see the motherboard shape. It goes sort of like an L, and that is in those workstations. They have the motherboard set up that way, and usually they don't use ATX power. So you can see there it doesn't have a 24 pin power plug. So what this person has done is he's either made or bought a converter power plug, and behind the motherboard plug that in there. So personally, I probably wouldn't buy this because those plugs can be a fire hazard, and I really enjoy having standard components. Now, I'm not saying that you shouldn't buy this, but I think that the value isn't there for this computer specifically because of what this person has done. And there's nothing wrong with, you know, using old parts and putting them in new builds, finding ways to fit them in. But personally, I wouldn't buy this unless it was a lot cheaper. I would probably buy this for like $450, to be honest. Just because you aren't allowing yourself an upgrade path at all by buying this, and these parts are very specific, and they weren't made for a case like this. Now, this doesn't look too bad, but personally, I don't much like it. But let's take a quick look at the specs here. So we have an 8600K. Now, I think that's only a 6-core CPU, so I do think the 1700 is a lot better from AMD, which is the previous system, which was cheaper. So you are getting a better graphics card here with the 2060 as compared to the 1660 Ti, but the difference in price doesn't make sense. And of course, this motherboard, along with the CPU, the way that this is set up, it's not something that I like, and so I would not recommend it be purchased, unfortunately. So apart from that, it does come with 16 gigs of RAM, just like the previous system, and it does have a 600 watt power supply. Also a worse power supply than the previous system. So if you're comparing this system that we looked at to this one, I would probably still go with this one because it's cheaper. And although the graphics card is a little bit worse, I think you are getting more value out of this one. Let's take a look at one that is a little bit more expensive at $850, the Kylo Ren gaming PC. This comes with a 1088 gig, 16 gigs of RAM, and a Ryzen 5 CPU. It doesn't say which one, but that looks like a first gen to me. Comes with Windows 11 and a 1 terabyte NVMe. Now, visually, this is very striking. Not the sort of thing that I like personally, but definitely looks cool, if I can put it that way. Definitely has a strong aesthetic to it. So if you do like this kind of look, then, you know, I think you might enjoy this PC. It looks really cool when the lights are off, but it's just not the kind of PC look that I enjoy. Definitely has a strong look though. So this is a Ryzen 5 3600, which is, so it's not a Zen one, it's a Zen Zen 2 chip, which is a 3rd gen Ryzen chip. And you know, the 3600 is a good gaming CPU, definitely, but it is only a 6-core 12-thread CPU, It does have a 32 megabyte L3 cache, which is quite big, and this comes with a B450M Pro Series motherboard. Now these were quite good back in the day. It does have the Wraith Prism CPU cooler, so that looks nice. And it comes with a 1080 8GB, which, as it says here, outperforms the 1660 and is equal to a 2060. I think that's more or less true. Comes with a 650 watt Evetech power supply, 80 plus gold, and Windows 11 Home. Now, the 1080 is definitely a fantastic card, but I think the price is too high on this system, because this system is coming in at $850. For $850, you could buy something new that would outperform this. As I've just take a look at some of my previous videos on Amazon, and those aren't even good value PCs. So I probably would avoid this, just because if this was a 3700X CPU and it had 32 gigs of RAM and a 2 terabyte NVMe, then this price point would be justified. But it doesn't. And I think that this price point is based more on aesthetics than it is on actual performance. Because this is not going to max out games now, not the newest games coming out. This is going to play games at low to medium. When you're talking about Stalker 2, when you're talking about some of the new games coming out like The Last of Us and these kinds of things. This PC isn't going to max that out. Now, neither is the 1660 Ti PC, this one, but at least it doesn't have the price point of wanting to max those out. And so far, this PC has the best value for me. Let's take a look at one last one here, and you'll see they are more like this. So this is the 1700. This is an Intel i7-8700 version. It's very similar in price. Actually, it's cheaper. It's almost $100 cheaper. Let's take a look at this one, because that's quite a good price. Now, I do think the 8700 is only a 6-core CPU, but it is quite a good 6-core CPU. It's a 6-core 12-thread CPU. This PC has also 16 gigs of RAM, and it has a 1660 Ti. But it is okay. But it's a worse case, probably a worse power supply. And apart from that, I think the value is a little bit less because of, not having those extras and having an obviously used and older case, which is fine. But I think that's where the $100 is being made up in the other PC. And I would probably take the other PC just because I do also, apart from gaming, I do productivity work, rendering and office work and all of these things. It is just better to have an 8-core CPU for anything that is, resource heavy outside of gaming. Now, this CPU is good for gaming, but it's not going to be much better than the 1700 from AMD, if at all better. So I would probably still go for this PC, even though it's a little bit more expensive. It's a much cleaner look. You can see it's a new chassis. Some of these parts are new, and it's just an overall better looking, better spec in terms of it can do gaming, but it can also do productivity. You can do rendering, video production, design, anything you need to do. And it's not going to be the fastest. It's not the newest components. It is about 10 years old at this point, but it's still going to be definitely worthy of being used in this day and age. Let's take a look at one last one here. So I'm going to assume this is a 2060 as well. So it's a 3050. Okay, that's interesting. So this is coming in at just under $700. And performance-wise, I think this would be the best one so far. So this has a Ryzen 3500, which is also a 6-core CPU, but it is the little brother of the 3600, of course. This has a RTX 3050, 16 gigs of RAM, and a 1 terabyte NVMe. It comes with Wi-Fi built in, and it has Windows 10. Now, I really like the way this looks, by the way. I like how small it is, and it kind of looks like a console, which I really like. It looks clean, it looks neat. It comes with some handy extras. So let's take a closer look here. Okay, so it has a Ryzen 5 3500 6-core. I think that's a 12-thread CPU. It has 16 gigs of DDR4 RAM. It doesn't say the speed, probably 3200. The 3058 gig is going to outperform the 1660 Ti. the 1080, maybe not on all tests, but overall it will, and it has better, more up-to-date technology. It'll outperform the 2060 as well. So in terms of gaming, this is the best PC we've looked at so far. It has a 1TB NVMe, they all have had that. A 600 watt bronze power supply. Now what I don't like about this is there's a little bit of vagueness. Now I do think that that's probably because the parts, this PC doesn't necessarily exist the way it looks right now. It's not, the person hasn't necessarily built it and put it aside and is waiting for you to buy it. I think maybe the parts are just a guideline, and so he doesn't commit to any name brands necessarily, because blazing fast 1TB NVMe, that doesn't say anything. 16 gigs of RAM doesn't say anything. Now of course the CPU is the CPU, I'm sure you can get many of those. And same with the power supply. It doesn't say which power supply it is. It doesn't say which Wi-Fi card you get. Let me just help the cat quick. And so I think this seller is more just a generic seller that sells a lot of PCs. He doesn't necessarily sell specific PCs. And you'll see that by the way this ad is set up. It looks very easy to read, very generic. What's included: power cable, quick start manual, Wi-Fi adapter, but it doesn't give a lot of details. So in some way I would probably avoid this, but in other ways I do think someone like this usually knows what they are doing in terms of putting together a PC. And just judging from the screenshots, this PC looks nice. I'm not sure if you'll get these parts specifically, because I also noticed he doesn't actually say anything about the chassis. So yeah, I don't know if it's intentional vagueness, but this ad could be better in terms of just actually telling you what you are going to get. But in terms of performance, the 3050 will do quite well. Now this person states that he has tested at 1080p low settings for the 3050, and he states 233 FPS on Apex, 312 on Fortnite, 667 on Valorant. That doesn't seem right. 250 on PUBG. These numbers seem made up. 346 on Overwatch, 280 on GTA. Yeah, I don't know about these numbers. 223 in Warzone, 825 in Counter-Strike 2. So I wouldn't necessarily trust these numbers. They seem extremely made up to me. But apart from that, the ad itself seems good. I would not buy from this person just because it's too vague. Here it does say that the case is a Zalman, so there's a little bit more detail here. But the ad itself just doesn't inspire too much confidence, and so I would probably avoid this. But if you take a look at the reviews and everything seems fine, maybe there's a fantastic value there. And well, let's just do that. Let's just take a look at the reviews. Why not? So this person has 5 stars from 10 reviews. So yeah, Jawa does have buyer protection, so you could always buy something, and if you're unhappy, send it back. Now no one likes to do that, but it is an option if you do need that option. So finally here, I was going to finish up, but I saw there's more down here that I didn't see, but we get an idea of the value. But I saw this one, and I'm just curious about what this is. So this is, okay, I see. So this is a better CPU because it's a 5700, but this doesn't come with a graphics card. So this is an APU based gaming PC. So you get the 5700G, 16 gigs of RAM, a 512 gig NVMe, and of course the case and whatever. I assume you get a keyboard and mouse as well. So the thing with this one is it's a good idea to sell PCs like this because you allow the person buying the PC to either use their old graphics card or to just buy a new graphics card. But the problem comes in when you look at the price, because this is priced the same as some PCs that offer a 1660 Ti or even a 1080, and this is priced the same as that. This has only 16 gigs of RAM, only a 512 gig NVMe. Yes, it has a better CPU, but you can't carry the PC on the CPU alone in terms of pricing. So again, I don't see the value in this one. If this was $400 maybe, but for $550 it's not a good value. And so overall I have to say the value hasn't actually been that good on these PCs. It hasn't really. This one is a good value, but even so you can build it for a lot cheaper. But for the rest of them the value hasn't been there, and for a lot of these, these are just things that are being resold from old work PCs and old office PCs, and that's fine. I mean, there's nothing wrong with doing that, but there's no reason why you can't just go and do that yourself. You can just go to a business, email them and ask if they have any old PCs to sell. There's no reason to buy someone else's stuff doing this. Now, of course, that is assuming that you enjoy building PCs. If you don't, there's no harm in buying something like this. And of course, the buyer protection gives you that little bit of peace of mind. So I don't think you can go wrong. I'm sure there are some PCs with decent value. We saw one or two, but overall the value hasn't really been that good. So maybe in the future we'll take a look at the more mid-spec and high-spec PCs and see if the value is better in those ones. But for this, it's been a bit of a meh. And I think you can just do better by just building it yourself. So that's going to be about it for the video. Thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next one. Cheers.